I present to you Abominations in Technicolor.
How to get burned? How to get burned? How to get burned? How to get burned? I don't know! Oh my God!
What killed the dinosaurs? Guys,
I need a second, okay? Why can't anybody give me a goddamn second? Stop ganging up on me!
Broadcasting from an undisclosed location which may or may not be a bedroom converted into a recording studio. I'm Rex Overdrive, back with another edition of Abominations in Technicolor. This show is brought to you by the fine folks over at Audible. Head on over to audibletrial.com/abominations and sign up for a free 30-day trial membership. Over 100,000 titles to choose from, and you can cancel anytime. That's audibletrial.com/abominations, and it directly supports the show. Now, joining me as always is Adam. How's it going, Adam?
It's going good. It's going good. Another week, another abomination. And I'm excited to get into some of these, keep going with the horror week, or horror month, rather. All month.
Yeah, and approaching is the new Halloween movie. That's something to really look forward to. I've been hearing good things about that, so I think we're only like 2 weeks away, less than maybe at this point.
Is this the 40th anniversary?
It is, yeah.
What marks the, that's why they would make one, I guess.
Yeah.
With Jamie Lee Curtis returning.
Yeah, the really curious thing about this Halloween, well, it's not a reboot or remake or anything. It's a sequel. I think it retcons the third Halloween movie. But Danny McBride is one of the writers on this, and that's pretty. I don't know. It's not something you would think about or come to mind, I guess, with a Halloween movie.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really mind the Rob Zombie Halloweens. I thought the first, I don't even know if I saw the second one, but the first one was, I don't know. I mean, I wanted it. I was happy to have it. Like, I was excited about it, but it's not, nothing's ever going to live up to the original one. And I feel like they try to do different things with the music, and if you change that music, then that's mistake number one. But, I don't know. This one, it's interesting to see the take of like Jamie Lee Curtis hunting him or whatever, like kind of in that position, taking that role of the hunter.
It kind of reminds me of Sarah Connor from like Terminator 2. It sort of has that aspect where her character's been like training for years, waiting for this moment for this person to show back up in her life.
Well, God, I swear to God, she cut his head off at the end of Halloween H2O, did she not? With an axe?
She did, but they're retconning all of that.
And then, I mean, I know after that there was Halloween Resurrection, was it?
Yeah, wasn't that the one with Busta Rhymes?
Busta Rhymes, I was just going to say, yeah. But yeah, that's stupid, though, like to do that.
I know. They have their
then
reasons,
again, we're
though.
talking horror here, so anything goes in the world of horror.
That's true, but something that we both saw a little bit earlier this week, this past Friday, was Venom, starring Tom Hardy. Now, without getting into too much detail, we want to say we're going to be doing a separate review here on the podcast feed, probably containing spoilers for that, but on here, let's just sort of give our overall thoughts, I suppose, of Venom.
Yeah, I thought it was a fun movie. I was laughing the entire time. Tom Hardy delivers a interesting and I would say he did a good job with his performance given what he had to work with, and given that a lot of there's a lot of special effects and things like that involved, and an internal monologue that he's got going on. with the way that these characters and the dynamics between them. So I really enjoyed it. I thought it was, the pacing of the movie was maybe something of an issue, but we'll get into a lot of that stuff. But as far as like what I thought I was getting out of it, I think it hit all my expectations, because we did mention even last week that movie was getting some poor reviews ahead of the general public seeing it, and so I kind of had a feeling that it was gonna disappoint in certain areas, and it did, but it also delivered in a lot of areas too. So yeah,
I think there's more positive than negative with this movie. I think there's a lot of stuff in the movie, and we'll get into specifics in that with like our spoiler review. But there's just some things in this movie that it's just not that well made of a film. And in terms of like the positive aspects, it really comes down for me to just the dynamic between Eddie Brock and Venom in this movie. And they really give a great sort of like progression with this like relationship. And to me, it's the star of the show when it comes down to it. I thought the villain was pretty weak, and I didn't think the story was too interesting. But overall, I had a good time. It's like I did a video on my YouTube channel, and I sort of reviewed the film, and I got into like, a lot of people, especially on the internet, like you either have to absolutely love something or just absolutely hate it and trash it at every moment in your life. There's no middle ground anymore, but it's okay to like just like something or think a movie was okay. So that's sort of my biggest issue with a lot of people.
At the end of the day, you got to look at this movie and say, would you rather watch Venom or would you rather watch Spider-Man 3?
Yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, Spider-Man 3 is probably worthy of being on our podcast. And
definitely.
At the end of the day, what they did with Venom and what Tom Hardy does with Venom, is far surpassing anything that we saw in Spider-Man 3, and not that people even liked that movie. That movie's known for kind of being the nail in the coffin for the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man run. So I don't know. I enjoyed it as well, and I'm right there with you, thinking as far as it being okay, that's exactly what it is, and it's because it's balanced. There's good there, and there's a little bit of bad as well.
Right. But moving on, continuing our month of horror, we have Child's Play in the queue. So let's get into that.
And now our feature presentation.
Everyone has a birthday they'll always remember.
Can we open my presents now, Mommy? A good guy! I knew it! I'm Chucky.
He's something, isn't he?
This is Andy's.
Time for bed, Andy. Good night, baby.
Good night, Aunt Maggie. Good night, Chucky.
Everyone knows most accidents happen at home.
How did that happen?
This is no accident.
Andy!
I'm Detective Mike Norris. Homicide.
Andy!
Miss Peterson's dead, Miss Barkley. She fell from the kitchen window.
Someone's moved in with the Barkley family. And so has terror.
Mommy, I know who was on the counter. Andy!
Who, Andy?
Chucky.
Nobody believes you about Chucky. He came alive in my hand.
Oh, for God's sake.
Why won't you believe me?
Because I'm sane, Mrs. Barkley. Sane and rational.
No one believes the truth. or lives to tell it. There's nothing nice about murder. And there's nothing innocent about child's play.
All right, so Child's Play, 1988. This movie is the first of a run of, well, over the last, 30 years, actually. I believe there are 7. Does that sound right, Rex? 7 Child's Play movies, I think.
Yeah, there's too many, to be honest.
But starting out with a $9 million budget, this movie ran worldwide to gross $44.2 million, which I think it was 33 or 34, something like that, domestic. So most of which was in the U.S. But this movie, people know Chucky, the main villain. Obviously, we'll be talking a lot about Chucky, and he kind of joins the ranks of some of these iconic horror villains that we'll have this month on the podcast, talking through these movies. So Child's Play, 67% on Rotten Tomatoes, being like 67% of the time, which is a little bit lower than Nightmare on Elm Street. This movie, given that it had so many sequels, it surprises me that it didn't have the big impact coming on the scene, or at least didn't sustain the test of time like maybe Nightmare on Elm Street did. So
right,
we'll have to see if any of our analysis uncovers any of the reason why that might be. But 67 still that's not too bad. That's still above 50. So
yeah, it's decent.
It's more liked than disliked. But yeah, what are some of your thoughts about this movie, or when did you first experience this movie?
Well, to be honest, I couldn't even remember the last time I watched this, and even when I first put it on in preparation of this episode, I feel like I seem to always watch Child's Play 2.
Okay.
And is that the one that takes place in like the factory at the end?
Oh, I'm not really sure.
I think it might be. I think it stars one of the ladies from 90210.
Okay.
But anyway, I don't really have that much of a history with Child's Play. I've always known of the character, and I saw Bride of Chucky in the late 90s, all that.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I don't really have much of a history with this movie. So
yeah, I think the first one I saw ever, and I think when I saw it, I think I thought it was, and I was a kid, but I'm pretty sure I saw it on TV, so probably edited for television, and it was Child's Play 3, the one where I think it's Andy still. I think Andy's through all of them, maybe, but the main boy is in like a military school, so I'm sure it was the third one, but that was my first experience with Child's Play. And I mean, they all kind of feel like they're the same situation where, he's trying to convince everyone that it's Chucky that's doing all this stuff, but it's kind of like Andy always gets caught in a boy who cries wolf kind of a position, and has to, it has to come to the worst case scenario before everyone kind of realizes what's going on and things escalate and all of that. But yeah, this movie, I mean, we're going to get into some details here as far as plot goes. And I think in order to do so, we're going to kick it over to our boys, Siskel and Ebert, and get into what their thoughts were on this movie.
Our next movie is named Child's Play, and it begins with a dying mass murderer, the Lakeshore Strangler, who has studied voodoo and uses black magic to transport his soul into the body of a good guy doll. Catherine Hicks plays the mother who unknowingly buys the possessed doll and brings it home as a present for her son, played by Alex Vincent.
A good guy! I knew it! I knew you'd get me one!
Show me how he works, okay?
Hi, I'm Andy. What's your name? Hi, I'm Chucky, and I'm your friend to the end. Heidi ho!
Wow, he's something, isn't he?
After his babysitter is killed by being pushed out the window by the doll, the little boy claims that Chucky the doll is alive, but of course, no one will believe him.
He said that Maggie was a real bitch and got what she deserved.
How can you say something so horrible?
I didn't say it, Chucky did.
Andy, stop it. You know perfectly well that you're making this up.
But I'm not. Chucky's alive.
Not even Hicks believes her own son until she makes the chilling discovery that Chucky can talk, even though he doesn't have any batteries.
Hi, I'm Chucky. Wanna play?
Child's Play is a good example of the sort of horror movie that I call the false alarm film, because every time there's a false alarm and then everybody relaxes, then the creature attacks. The movie is well made with convincing performances by Catherine Hicks and little Alex Vincent, and I guess I should also mention they did a good job on the doll. In the early scenes it looks so wholesome, you know it has something wrong with it, and in the later scenes it transforms itself into a truly frightening personality. It was an effective horror film.
It wasn't an effect. It was not for me. No, I mean I laughed at the doll, and I also don't like to have scenes with children in terrorized situations. You remember, you said at the top of the show about how you're sick and tired of seeing priests being used as villains in a way, or their sacraments being tossed around. I hate to see kids in perilous situations. I think it's one of the easiest, cheapest thrills that you can do.
But this is a plucky little kid, and he stands up for himself, and he is not just simply running around screaming.
He's not entirely.
He's given something to do, and he's a pretty good actor.
I think that the business, if you want a picture about where a doll comes alive and is really threatening, I think a good film was, a better film was with Anthony Hopkins and Margaret, called Magic a few years ago. This film is not at that league. I just thought it was silly, and I didn't buy it at all.
All right, so Siskel, sour yet again. Now, I don't think we've had these guys on here one time with with the movies that we've been reviewing on here. I know that a lot of the stuff that we do is sort of movies with poor reviews in general, sometimes, or like cult movies that have gotten popular over time. But I seriously don't think there's one movie that we've covered that he's actually liked.
Yeah, and I guess the thing that doesn't surprise me so much is we do see a trend of Roger Ebert liking a lot of these movies we're covering. So there is something to be said about the dynamic between these two guys and the selection, I guess, that we have. We're kind of identifying something here. It can't be that Roger Ebert just likes all movies. That could be, but I doubt that's the case. But yeah, I just don't think I've ever agreed with the reasons that Siskel has for not liking the movies. Like, he picks apart the child element of the movie, like making a movie where the kid is scared, or he thinks it's a cheap way to get scares. Like, I just don't. I feel like that's like a stretch, or that's wouldn't it be easier to go after the doll element of the story, or the plot, like saying like a doll, I don't like the doll dynamic. He says, he references the Anthony Hopkins doll movie, so it kind of covers his own butt, so he doesn't contradict himself. But I don't know. That doesn't tell me much about their opinions. I guess I would have liked to hear Ebert elaborate a little bit as well.
Yeah, and even with Siskel, like, criticizing that aspect of the film, like when I review a film, I judge it for what it is, and mention, well, they went with this story and filming technique with this puppet. How well did they do it? Judge it in that way. It's almost like he's judging it before he even seen it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and
that's just the sort of vibe I get from him.
Yeah, he's at least from what we've heard, been known to judge the movies based on the concepts, like it's a cute idea. He called Tremors a cute idea, but it was a stupid movie or whatever. But this one, I think there's plenty of movies that have come out where they feature dolls or puppets or characters that were played by puppets or something, like say like a Leprechaun movie or something like that, where there's a lot of that could be like makeup and prosthetics or a costume or something, to the extent that it's basically like looks like a puppet. But yeah, the 80s is full of characters like that and villains in horror. So I mean, it makes sense that he wouldn't try to just take a shot at that as a concept, but they didn't really get into some detail on this one. It's like they didn't even want to touch it. They didn't want to get their hands dirty on this one, so it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, these guys were both split. Ebert was positive, Siskel was negative about it. But I mean, I think back then that's probably how it was, and even the tomato meter was 67%. So I think this is a movie that sort of over time probably gained a big following, as we see with like 7 films like you mentioned. I haven't seen like the last, I don't know. They even sort of rebranded this franchise from Child's Play to strictly naming it with Chucky in the title. So I don't know. I think at this point in 1988, worldwide was really surprising to hear that it only made like $4 or $5 million. But I don't know. I'd like to chat with somebody who actually saw this in theaters and sort of what their sort of first impression of the film was, if it was actually like scary or not.
Yeah, I mean, I would think it'd be a lot scarier back then, and the fact that he touched on there being kind of these fake out scares where you're kind of getting teased and then boom, and then they hit you right afterwards with something real or whatever. And this movie builds a lot. It starts slow and it teases you a little bit, little by little, and then finally, I think at the point where Chucky's kind of been exposed and he is like directly taking Andy hostage, more or less, like trying to get him to take him back to his hideout or whatever. Like at that point it's kind of like the wheels are really turning. The train is in motion and that thing is going full speed ahead. So there's no really like nothing holding it back. The movie's approaching its climax, and I think that's the point where it finally kind of picks up and it gets a little more exciting. And but it's still kind of at this point in time, 2018, it doesn't really hit where it maybe could have back then when, sitting in a theater in 88, you maybe would have been on the edge of your seat a little bit more, jumping a little bit more from, it's hard to get too scared of a good guy doll at this point, especially when the image of Chucky isn't very intimidating, just given the fact that he's been a part of pop culture for so long, Yeah,
I mean, would you consider in terms of like 80s horror icon, or I guess I'm going to include Michael Myers on this.
Of course.
The Mount Rushmore of horror. Would you include Chucky on that?
Oh, man. Well, it depends. What are we doing? 4? Top 4?
I don't think you could include Chucky if it's 4.
I mean, I think it'd be Jason and Freddy Krueger,
Michael Myers,
and yeah, I mean, you'd probably look to go with the Chucky, or I don't know. I mean, the only other really big horror movies, I mean, like Poltergeist is kind of a staple of that time frame.
Hellraiser was
Hellraiser. Yeah, you could probably
movies. Pinhead on there.
Pinhead would be up there as well. Yeah. Yeah, good question. That's interesting. I don't know. I'd have to look at there's probably some that aren't coming to mind right now that I might consider, but yeah, that's a good start though.
I think he's a very sort of iconic, like memorable, like just in terms of like visually, he's a very recognizable character. But
you could go Leatherface or whatever.
Yeah, he's probably one that needs to go.
That'd be a good one. Yeah. But
go ahead.
I don't know. I mean, I just think like there's other opinions that we have available. You know, we could bring in our buddy, the Robetronic one, who has a voicemail or email rather.
Here he comes.
Could get an opinion from this guy.
What up, Abominators? It is your favorite AI guy Arthur here, with another listener message for your ear pleasure centers. This one comes from a male organism called Brett, from a land called Wisconsin Town. Brett writes, "Hey guys, I caught this movie on Hulu recently and I just couldn't help but watch it again. However, when I watched this movie as a kid, it seemed so much better. I don't know if it's because of how dated it is, or if it's just because dolls are no longer scary to me. Either way, I can't believe they ended up making so many of these Child's Play Chucky movies. I mean, come on. Did they really need to make a Bride of Chucky movie? Anyways, I am sure you guys will have plenty of things to say about this one. I am really digging the podcast. Arthur is my boy."
Oh my gosh.
I do have to agree with like the perspective of this being really scary when you're younger, and then just the concept alone growing up, it's not going to be nearly as scary as when you were, I don't know, whenever you first saw this movie as a kid or a teenager. Just visually, it's not going to be something that sort of sticks with you, and that's still scary.
Yeah, I think back then the dolls too were probably, just kind of able to do certain things like talk, and I don't know what the toys were doing back then, but
Cabbage Patch Kids in the 80s.
I mean, I think talking was probably something that was pretty standard with dolls and toys in the late 80s. So this concept of having a doll that like Chucky, like I think all the kids probably had maybe not a good guy doll, but something similar, and like a Teddy Ruxpin or whatever, like that kind of thing. So having that kind of relatability or that parallel between your doll at home and then this story and this concept, you might look at your own toys a different way after seeing this movie.
Yeah. I mean, I think dolls, not just dolls, but like action figures, or what are those? Are they like the porcelain dolls?
I don't know.
The really
like Russian nesting dolls?
No, not Russian nesting dolls. the like the porcelain ones that sit up on like a shelf. Those ones, I guess.
Yeah,
I think those can be terrifying at night, especially when they're like wearing like the weird doily shit.
Oh yeah,
that's terrifying. But like I can totally buy into that concept. And for me though, like I guess with this movie, I like how they introduce sort of like the voodoo stuff, but I felt like they didn't get into that stuff early enough. And I really like the way Chucky looks, but I don't know. I just find it sort of weird, like, and not to knock on, kids out there. There's nothing wrong with it, but just like being so fascinated with this doll, like I don't even know. There was like a TV show, right? That this has become some like worldwide phenomenon. This like good guy. They sort of try and create this like phenomenon in the movie that this like franchise is super popular, and like Andy wants this doll so bad.
Yeah, that's kind of a parallel to of what things are like in real life around the holiday season. I think there's always at least one or several hot ticket items that kids are going after, like what was it, Tickle Me Elmo was one of the biggest toys of all time or whatever. That it's been a long time, maybe 10 to 12 years at least since then, but yeah, like that's something that you think of in real life that is something that we've all seen, and I think it's pretty cool. Like I would agree that the voodoo stuff, like you got to have a way to get him in that doll. Like that's probably something where they sat in a room and they're like, oh shit, like we know what we're gonna do. We're gonna have a doll that's gonna kill people, but how the hell are we gonna get the doll? Like what's his motive, And I would agree that it seemed like it wasn't quite early, like not that it wasn't early enough in the movie, because it was right at the beginning, but it wasn't explained, at least. Yeah. Why does Charles Lee Ray know how to use voodoo? And I really would have liked to see some sort of a transition or something that just kind of like indicated that, either the way he looks or something about him that it kind of just gives me a feel for like this is normal for this guy to be equipped with this kind of medicine man like ability. And they kind of give us a little taste of the fact that he kind of worships this I don't know if you'd call it a religion or this dark art or whatever, when they go back to his place and you see kind of his room and there's all this stuff on the walls and stuff like that. I think, am I remembering this correctly?
Yeah, I think so.
So you then kind of get this like, oh, okay, he's just like into this. It's just something that he's worshiping. He's exercising this voodoo magic or whatever, and that's how he's been able to wield it. And that's cool, because it's like, how many times has he done it? Was the body we saw him in at the beginning of the movie, like, was that his original body?
Oh, yeah.
Because he's like dying and he's thinking like, I need a body.
Right. Yep.
So you at that point you're kind of like, when you kind of realize like he can transfer like that. It's like how old is he? You know, so that's a cool concept. I like that. It's just that in the beginning, you know, we're in Child's Play 1 and he's just kind of fleeing the crime scene, you know, trying to escape from the cop, and you're just like, what the hell is going on? He's using voodoo on a doll to get put in the doll. Like, that is just nuts.
Yeah, it just feels sort of rushed, you know.
It does. It's very rushed, and you just kind of gotta just, you know, in that point, I can imagine like these, like, you know, these 70-year-old people like walking out of the theater like, this is stupid. Like, let's go see let's go watch a Clint Eastwood movie instead. You know, like,
yeah,
pissed. You know, so I don't know. But you have to know what you're watching, like we always say, and the idea of the doll coming to life, like that's what they wanted. That's what they need to be able to do, and that's how they got it there to that point. So you have to accept it, or you might as well just stop watching.
Yeah, and we actually have a clip here sort of discussing just the idea of, you know, creating this doll and just sort of the concept of Chucky. So let's take a listen.
There's something about dolls and dolls coming alive that's a common fear that everybody understands because they felt it as children, or they turned off the lights in a darkened child's room, and all of a sudden very benevolent toys take on a frightening aspect.
Hi, I'm Chucky. Wanna play?
When I was a kid, I was scared to death of my sister's dolls. To me, it was the eyes. They just constantly stare, and they seem to know all.
I think that people find the idea of a doll that comes to life something that obviously harkens back to me, to childhood. That there's nothing so horrible as what the imagination creates. I went in today and watched a particular scene in which the doll attacked somebody, and I suddenly realized what this picture is going to be like. It's going to be scarier than hell.
All right, so we get some of the cast and crew just sort of talking about, I guess, sort of what they feel like this movie might invoke in the audience, and sort of like their sort of fears with dolls and stuff like that. Now, I have this clip here from the movie. It's sort of a scene, and I think it's one of the best parts of the movie, and I just want to sort of share it with everyone, especially with listeners who haven't sort of, I don't know if you're listening to this podcast and you've never seen Child's Play before. I hate to spoil it to you, but this clip's just so goddamn good. So should I play it here?
Oh, well, now you have to.
Okay, so
yes. I'll speak on behalf of everyone. Yes, play it.
Okay, so this is right when Chucky escapes and Andy's mom's about to throw his ass into the fire.
Talk to me. Come on, talk. I said talk to me, damn it! All right. Then I'm gonna make you talk.
She just realized that there's no batteries in Chucky.
I said talk to me, damn it, or else I'm gonna throw you in the fire!
You stupid bitch! You filthy slut! Did you fuck with me?
Oh, it's just so good, man. And you got to give a lot of that credit to, obviously, the actress there. But,
yeah.
You know, I don't think we really talked about him yet.
Wormtongue?
Brad Dourif.
Yeah, man. Two Towers, Wormtongue, man. Lord of the Rings,
but
in the flesh.
I like, for me, this movie just in general sort of, I don't know, the first third of it, I was really bored. And once Chucky really kicks it up a notch, I was just having a complete blast. But I don't know. I just thought I'd share that clip with everyone because it's just one of my favorite moments in the movie.
Well, you've got a good combination of language and good voice acting and blood-curdling screams, which I think is quite necessary. And that's something that both of the movies we've covered, Nightmare on Elm Street and this movie, Child's Play, have had. Like, both of the leading actresses have had great screams. I think that's one of the primary prerequisites for being a horror lead is the scream. It's all about the scream.
Yeah. And I mean, it's got to be quite difficult to sort of make a movie with your main protagonist being a 6-year-old boy. And
right.
I mean, the mom, she's in the movie quite a bit, but she's not, I wouldn't say she's nearly the lead. She gets
you gotta figure that she maybe has to compensate for his like inexperience a little bit, or she has to perform so well that it elevates his, or you know what I mean? Like, I feel like she's got to command attention with her performance so that it makes his less intolerable.
Yeah.
But he was just kind of supposed to be the innocent, pure, gullible little kid who just wanted a toy. And I mean, he does Chucky's bidding throughout the whole beginning of the movie. He's like, do this, do this, do this, and he does it all. Takes him places. He's supposed to go to school and they get on the bus or whatever. I can't remember how they end up going to, basically like a homeless crack house or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's just, I don't know. It's an interesting thing to have to, and that's kind of where the movie kind of slowed down for me, is like, where's this going? Like, what are they trying to do? He's kind of trying to, is he just trying to get another body, or is he trying to sacrifice the kid, or what's the motive? And it develops very slow to get to that point, but yeah, I like the clip though. I like I would agree with the concept of dolls being, I think it's the idea of an inanimate object becoming animate. It's like this thing that's supposed to be so still. You see a lot of shots in horror where a doll will like blink and it's scary somehow. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
That idea of something that's just supposed to be still and not move at all, and the moment that it does is scary. There's something scary about that. Look at the clown in Poltergeist, or I don't know, stuff like that.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I don't know. I just think Chucky, this movie especially, like, I really got the way they sort of filmed it, kind of like, I know we sometimes mention Jaws quite a bit, but just how that first half, like, they hardly show you the shark at all, and it builds that suspense. So then when Chucky does turn full-on murder doll, it's like, holy shit, look at this guy. He's like this foul-mouthed, like Joe Pesci from Goodfellas, like, swearing up a storm and like super angry. It
does make it more impactful.
Yeah.
Having kind of the big reveal and I mean, that probably makes it easier to shoot too. Like, this included a lot of special effect work which we'll get to later, but I do think that's so important with horror, is to build a little bit. Like, you'll see any of the movies where it'll be just kind of like the villain will kind of tease a little bit, whether it be Halloween or Nightmare on Elm Street. The main characters never really get full exposure to the villain right away. It's always side characters kind of getting picked off, like the babysitter, or is it his aunt, I think, that dies?
I think it's the mom's best friend, but they call her aunt.
Yeah. So I mean, that's typical in the horror movie formula. Is we don't have direct exposure, or at least a direct reveal to the primary characters, and therefore to the audience, until later when you want to get that climactic moment. So this one follows suit, and they do it effectively, and I think the teases that they give are entertaining, and I don't know, I thought it was effective for me. It gave me some suspense. I was there and engaged.
Yeah, it's not the scariest movie, and it's not the most exciting, but it does when it delivers some pretty entertaining moments. They're just kind of sprinkled here and there throughout the film.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want something that's gonna like revolutionize the industry or whatever. Like, it's like, like you brought up Jaws, so I'll piggyback on that. Like, the idea of kind of making do with what you have, as far as not having the shark, or figuring out a way to do like first person view or something like that. I think they did that in Halloween as well, like showing the view of Michael Myers through his eyes of his mask or whatever. They did that some, and I think there was a little bit of that in Child's Play too, kind of as he was walking through the kitchen or something like that. I can't remember, but yeah, I don't know. I think this one follows all the right horror formula to a certain extent. So I don't know. I think it's time, like, after the break, we're going to get into some of the special effects on this thing. I think this would be a good time to kind of break those down, get a little bit of a feel for what they had to put into this movie. So we'll be right back.
Audible is offering our listeners a free audiobook with a 30-day trial membership. Just go to audibletrial.com/abominations and browse the unmatched selection of audio programs. Download a title free and start listening. It's that easy. Go to audible.com/abominations and get started today. All right, and we're back. We have a clip queued up of just some of the special effects, some behind-the-scenes stuff of making of Child's Play. So let's listen to this.
I am amazed in looking at it, what we were able to accomplish with very simple, rudimentary filmmaking techniques. There's a scene where Chucky's walking down a hall, and what you don't see is that there's a dolly that's being pushed as the camera's on him as he's looking back and forth across this hall. And it worked incredibly well. Sometimes we would use a version of the house that was 30% larger. So when we put a little person in a costume, that little person looked like he was much smaller.
Several times we used Ed Gale. He's about 10 inches taller than Chucky. We would come to the shop and he would study the doll, because we decided if he just moved fluently, we could not mimic that.
The wonderful actor that played Chucky as a little person studied what Kevin was doing with the movements of the doll and tried to capture that movement in his movements.
We used him in scenes like when Chucky gets caught on fire, he runs around. It's a 30% bigger stage, so Ed was about 30% bigger than Chucky, so they literally built an entire living room stage 30% larger.
Now that's some pretty cool stuff. Like, I didn't. There's moments throughout this movie where I thought, yeah, that probably is a dwarf or a little person, but never did I sort of think that they would have built the set 30% larger to sort of compensate that. That's pretty crazy stuff.
Yeah, I always thought it was just puppetry, you know, like even the animatronic stuff, like watching some of the special features on this thing, it's amazing what they had to do to get his face and his lips and for the dialogue stuff. Like, you really wouldn't expect there to need to be much there for them to, you know, he doesn't really talk a lot. They're not really zooming in on his face very often. It's pretty limited as far as that goes. So I was very surprised by the both the budget and these details as far as what different dynamics they had to do in order to get the right shots and the right effects in the shots.
Yeah, at one point in one of the behind the scenes videos that I was watching, they mentioned that there was sometimes up to 8 puppeteers working on the one doll while filming scenes. And that's crazy stuff. Crazy. That kind of goes back to another movie that we did on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, Howard the Duck. Now, that movie had a character in the suit, and then there was, you know, puppeteers, you know, puppeting the eyes and the mouth and all the facial expressions. And that's sort of the same with Chucky, but on a much smaller level here. And it's just limitations, man, like how hard that is. And, you know, like even the South Park guys, when they were filming Team America World Police, like they really mentioned like how hard it is to just shoot an entire movie with puppets.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, practical effects, I feel like it's like the purest way to do it at this point in this day and age with CG and everything being so top notch. It's like you're really kind of going back. It's like the equivalent of someone who wants to listen to music on vinyl, you know? to do something like that now, like the way they're doing practical effects with Star Wars and stuff like that to kind of capture that original look. I appreciate that, and I love the concept of seeing something real and tangible and not being able to detect that it's animated. And you know, now they kind of are doing that best of both worlds where you use practical effects and animatronics and stuff like that along with animation over the top. And maybe that's what they're doing with the new Chucky movies. I don't know. I haven't checked out Cult of Chucky or whatever came out. I think last year Cult of Chucky came out, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, I mean, I love the idea of this. I love it's kind of like the opposite of what they did with Lord of the Rings, having Gandalf in a hobbit hole, like where he's larger than the set. Like this one, they really had to like make the set larger in order to make him look smaller. Yeah. But movie magic, man. I mean, even horror, they got to get into some of this movie magic. So it's pretty cool to see.
Yeah, it's creativity and trying to come up with a way to sort of pull something off. They'll do anything, man. So that is pretty crazy to sort of learn that was sort of a workaround. Well, let's just make the set bigger, you know?
Yeah, right. But you got to figure, like, any horror movie is going to have some sort of a chase, some sort of a cat and mouse element to it. And in the end, it kind of goes there where, you know, they're kind of in the apartment, and Chucky, he's just kind of on a rampage. He's got, does he have a knife?
Yeah.
And they talk about him being burnt. Like, that whole end sequence is just so crazy. Like, it's just nuts, where they trap him in the fireplace and burn him. And then the mom is like shooting him with a gun and hitting like all of his different appendages off. Like, she shoots his head off, then she shoots both arms off, and then both of his legs or whatever. And he's like just a torso. And then, I mean, it's just friggin' nuts. Like, the way that he just doesn't die. Like any horror, I mean, if you want to be on the Mount Rushmore of horror that we previously referenced, then you basically can't die, or you have to be able to like resurrect yourself. In this case, Chucky can basically do both, I think.
Yeah.
Because, you know, you can't burn him to death, you can't shoot him to death, hardly. If you melt him, he can then just kind of like be molded into a new one. You know, I think that's in one of them. He gets melted down, and then he can become hard molded plastic again or whatever. So it's so crazy. Like, there really is no, they will always be able to write a way to get him back in, which maybe is part of the appeal of Chucky. You can never get rid of him.
Yeah, it has that sort of supernatural aspect that sort of, I don't know, makes it maybe a little bit more interesting.
That Charles Lee Ray, man. I mean, it's like, even if he doesn't have a body, his spirit, it's his soul, his spirit. So, you know, if you believe that the premise can happen to begin with, then you have to be able to believe that he could, you know, just like that body dies and gets destroyed, and then he could float and possess another one. You know, why not?
Yeah. Now, we've been sort of praising the movie, not really praising it, but talking about some of the cool aspects and just the movie overall in general. But what's terrible about this film?
Well, I mean, for me, like, some of the performances are pretty bad. I didn't care for the mom or the son. You know, their performances. I didn't even really care for the cop. What's that dude's name? He's Susan Sarandon's first husband.
Oh.
Yeah, Chris Sarandon.
So she's kept his last name for this long?
Homicide Detective Mike Norris. I guess. That's what I read. Chris Sarandon, man.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But he's recognizable.
Yeah. You know? Like, I've seen that guy before, but I can't think of anything I've seen him in.
It looks like he had some horror background back then, and there was one cool one that I saw that I was pretty excited about. He played Jack Skellington's voice in The Nightmare Before Christmas.
Oh, okay.
So Danny Elfman did the singing,
right?
But he was Jack Skellington's voice.
I never knew that.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, that is cool.
But yeah, I don't know. Aside from that, I mean, nothing too crazy. He was in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles TV series recently, playing the character Count Dracula. Or maybe the episode was called Count Dracula. I don't know. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think for me, the movie, I feel like, just like with Nightmare on Elm Street, it doesn't really have like the best setting. It doesn't, we're talking about like an apartment. It's happening in an apartment, and it starts off in the toy store. I just feel like, at least with Child's Play 3, that was an interesting setting at the military school.
Yeah.
And it doesn't, like, this movie doesn't go a lot of places for me. So I like to see, you know, Chucky kind of moving around, and it just makes it more exciting. You know, when they went to that hideout or whatever, that crack house, whatever that was, like, that kind of mixed it up a little bit, and you know, it kind of took it to a place where I was kind of curious what was going to happen next. But yeah, the doll itself too, like, I like the visual of some of the newer movies. Like, over the years, his face has gotten more and more menacing.
Right. All the scars and stitches and stuff.
Yeah. And that's probably just wear and tear of you know, being a doll and getting the shit kicked out of you over the years because you're a doll and you're not strong, and you know, he more or less has to kind of sneak up on people in order to get the job done. But if he's head to head, like, I feel like I could take on Chucky. I don't think I would have an issue kicking, you know, drop kicking his ass or something, you know?
Yep.
But I don't know, running him over with a car, you know, that'd be fun. But but yeah, I don't. The ending for me though is probably the time where I feel like it's both the best and worst parts of the movie, because it's the most exciting, but it's also kind of the point where I'm like, oh my God, he's still alive. Like, when is he going to be dead? This is ridiculous. He's like he's like a burnt marshmallow.
Yeah.
Like
it's pretty over the top.
A charred burnt marshmallow, and he's still going, you know?
Yeah, he just won't give up.
It's one thing if it's Freddy Krueger and he's caught on fire and, you know, whatever, but when it's a doll, it's just so dumb. Yeah, it's stupid.
Well, and at that point, he can't express any, like, his facial expression is gone. There's really nothing to show visually other than just this burnt to a crisp doll that's still trying to kill these characters.
Right. Yeah, so for me, that's kind of, you know, at that point, it's like, you know, I've already pretty much watched the entire movie, so it's not like I'm going to shut it off at that point, but I just kind of feel like they maybe could have cleaned it up a little bit at the end and just kind of just burned him in the fireplace and then he's dead, you know, something like that. And then in the sequel, maybe you show like the smoke coming out of the fireplace, out of the chimney or something, and then take it in some direction. Like, that's kind of how he, you know, through the smoke or whatever, maybe he's able to reincarnate himself or whatever. But I don't know.
Yeah.
What do you think? What are your lowlights of the movie?
I mean, a big one for me is just the little boy. I understand he's a little kid, and there's a lot of limitations when casting that young of an actor with their acting ability, but I just couldn't get behind him. And especially the beginning of the movie when he's eating his cereal. Didn't he pour like the cereal and milk all over the place when he was trying to make that bowl of cereal?
I don't know. I wasn't paying attention.
I just couldn't get behind this kid as a protagonist. And even while watching it, I was like thinking of what's the little kid's name from The Phantom Menace that got criticized so much?
Oh, I don't know. I have no idea.
I don't. Yeah, I'm gonna kill myself for not remembering it.
But
Jake Lloyd. Jake Lloyd.
Oh, okay. Yeah, the one who played Anakin Skywalker.
I was even thinking about that kid. Like that kid could walk circles around this kid. I know he was a few years older, but still, like, cast a little bit older. I mean, it may have been weird for that age to be playing with a doll, I suppose, but I don't know. It's just, to write your movie around a 6-year-old kid, it makes it hard to watch, and it sort of makes you feel like, well, who is this movie sort of made for? You know?
Yeah, it helped when you had the adults around when everything was going down, and I don't think the music really helped at all either. Like, I don't feel like that provided enough of a foundation or enough support for the actors for it to really be a menacing, haunting kind of movie. Like, so many other horror movies have good music, and it resonates really well, and it helps kind of build the suspense. But this one, it had this really like chimey, jingly kind of music to it, and it's eerie, but it's not like, I don't know. It's kind of like in that same vein as like music you'd hear like a toy keyboard or something. You know what I mean? Like, does that sound like, at the beginning of the trailer, we'll listen to it from the start. It's kind of like, I don't know. I get that it kind of relates to the premise, but I feel like that could have been better, and that would have helped out a lot with the movie. And, you know, when I think of all my favorite horror movies, they all have pretty decent music, especially with Halloween, or even Freddy and Nightmare on Elm Street had a lot better music than this movie did.
Yeah, and I mean, some of the redeeming aspects about this movie, I really liked. I think the puppetry is pretty solid for the time. I mean, you have to suspend your disbelief, but like, I really feel like I'm watching sort of like something that's somewhat coming to life, you know, and that comes down to, you know, the puppeteers and the voiceover work and
the voice acting.
I really liked how, I just love how this doll is like this. And I said it before, like this sort of like Joe Pesci type, you know, criminal character, and it's so entertaining. And when the movie has those moments, I'm locked in and I'm enjoying the film. But the first sort of like, I don't know, I guess up until when Chucky actually starts to, you know, show that he's alive to the audience and to like the adults in the film, I'm pretty bored.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, I think it's important to focus on the fact that Charles Lee Ray does not want to be in that doll's body.
Right.
You know, like, he's pissed and hates being in that body, and that's his purpose, is to, you know, have, through Andy, figure out a way to get out of that body. And I think that gave some opportunity for a little bit of comedy, and his voice acting was great. Like, I love the grit in his voice compared to the like soft plasticky look of the doll, like that kind of like, I don't know, those blue eyes and the red hair. Like, it's supposed to be a wholesome looking doll, but then when you hear like that gritty, you know, profane language that's coming out of his mouth, especially in that clip that you played, like that is some of the quintessential Chucky material right there. And that's kind of what helps redeem that character and make that character iconic, is the idea of that, like, this guy is in there, he's trapped, he's pissed, and he's gonna do whatever he needs to get out of there, including murder and anything else that comes his way. So it's a pretty entertaining, like you said, a pretty entertaining ride, if you can accept the fact that that's what you're getting into.
Yeah, it's not a movie that I'll watch often, I'd say, but it was fun to revisit it, especially that I couldn't even remember the last time I watched it. I may have not even watched it all the way through the previous time I saw the film, but
I'll say though, like, I feel like it was underwhelming as far as the kill scenes. Like,
definitely
with any horror movie, I think like people are, there's a series of checkpoints throughout the movie, and I feel like those are the scenes that people die. So, those should be sprinkled in throughout in order to keep us all engaged. And between those kill scenes should be dialogue that builds suspense, either by deepening the character development or moving the plot forward, or more information about the villain and their motives or whatever it might be. But these deaths in this movie didn't really didn't inspire. They didn't really resonate. Like, to be honest, I can't even really remember. I think the one that I remember that stands out the most is when the babysitting best friend of the mom or whatever gets hit in the back with, like, what is it? Like it's like a little hatchet or something. Like I thought it was like a little toy axe or something that she gets hit in the back with, but maybe it was a knife, or I don't know. But she gets pushed by getting hit in the back. It sends her off toward the window, I think. Does that sound right?
Well, I thought she turns around and Chucky hits her in the face with the toy hammer.
Okay, a hammer.
And then she sort of stumbles
a handled
back
object.
And falls out the window.
Gotcha. Okay, so she falls backwards.
Yeah.
After getting hit, after she turns around and sees him. Okay. But didn't she falls on a car too, right?
Yeah.
So that's the one that I think was the most exciting to me, and that's fairly early on in the movie. And from there, I don't really feel like anything else was terrifying or memorable or anything else. I really only just recall the end where they're more or less destroying him rather than what the stuff that he's doing being very scary. So that's where that movie, I think, in the next installments, I think they do a little bit better job of making his stuff more interesting.
Yeah. I think they sort of really capitalize on the outrageousness of Chucky from the first film, with his foul language and just crazy antics. And I haven't seen any of the more recent Chucky or Child's Play films, but I'm sure they're right up there in terms of how outrageous that character is in the movie.
Yeah.
So.
And I mean, just like with Freddy, you see Chucky become almost more of a horror / comedy character. There's going to be one-liners and things in there that are laughable as well as a little scary as well. So really you're kind of getting multiple buttons pushed as you watch the movie. For the adults, they're going to be, somewhat excited by the horror, gore, language element, but then they're also going to be laughing at parts too, in some of those newer movies with the character of Chucky. But then kids might not be laughing as much. They might just be scared throughout. So, if they're even really, they probably shouldn't even be watching it. But, I think they find a way. Life finds a way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, So yeah, I think that's what makes him an accessible character. Is he's one of those people just like Freddy Krueger, where he has that horror comedy combination.
Yeah. Yeah, there's always a place for characters like that.
Yep.
You know, they grow and evolve and sort of find their niche in the genre. So,
and it's almost something you can kind of fall back on. So if your initial approach, you know, with this movie, that the character may have come off a little campy, and they maybe the feedback of this movie was that, you know, hey, we really responded to when Chucky called Andy's mom a bitch and whatever else he said to her in that scene. Like that was really funny stuff. We need to, you know, build on that and expand upon it. And, you know, I love that stuff. That's the goods right there. So that's what gets you from Child's Play 1 and 2 and 3 to Seed of Chucky and Cult of Chucky and Curse of Chucky and Bride of Chucky, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. But I think we can wrap this sucker up.
Please.
It's a fun movie when it works. I think it's a good Halloween movie to watch. I think it has a little bit of scares in there and some laughter and a little bit of everything. So, but we want to know what you guys think of Child's Play. You know, drop us a line in either email or give us a call, voicemails at 616-594-0764, or email us at abominationspod@gmail.com. Adam, what are we going to be talking about next week?
Oh, next week we're going to get into one of the previously mentioned potential Mount Rushmore members of the horror genre, Hellraiser, featuring Pinhead. Or I don't know if he's called that in the actual movie or if that's kind of his nickname. But Hellraiser is a staple of the history of horror throughout the years. So we're excited to get into that one. That'll be one that I don't think I've ever seen it all the way through. So I'm excited to get into that one.
I've never seen it at all. It was one of the movies I intentionally avoided while strolling through the horror aisle at the local video store growing up as a kid. So it'll be fun. But guys, make sure to let us know what you thought of Child's Play, like we said before, and we'll see you next week.